Thursday, everybody, to all those wine enthusiasts out there. Hard to believe we are heading into Memorial Day weekend. Thanks for joining us for virtual day trip to wine country presented by Citi. I'm Sam Kimball from New York Wine Events. Today we are going back to the Napa Valley, the world famous wine growing region north of San Francisco. I thought it'd be fun since we're heading to a holiday weekend to do a few fast facts about Napa Valley. So here goes. Only 4% of all the wine grapes grown in the state of California come from Napa. It's a dry Mediterranean climate covering only 2% of the world's surface. And yet Napa Valley wine industry represents $50 billion to the American economy. In the county of Napa Valley, there are 430 wineries approximately, producing 815 different wine brands. So we're really excited because today we're going to one of the very best of all those vineyards. I mean, we're talking the top of the top in Calistoga, California, the northern part of Napa Valley. Some call this winery a crown jewel in Napa Valley. We're heading to the famous Chateau Montelena winery. It's an amazing place, founded in 1882 with a castle and landscape gardens surrounded by vineyards. Chateau Montelena's calling card, or claim to original fame, is that it gains worldwide fame for winning the white wine section of the historic Judgment of Paris wine competition in 1976. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was the moment at which the California wine producing world and the industry hit the world stage as a big time player. So to learn all about Chateau Montelena, they have wonderful history on their website. You can visit montolena.com. That's MONTELENA.com. There is a spoiler alert. I like to mention amazing deals at the top of the show. And by the way, if you like wine, take advantage of this deal today because it's awesome. And it only lasts through the holiday weekend. And that is the Chateau Montelena. If you use the promo code Zinfandel, you get free shipping on 6 bottles or more anywhere in the US, but that's through the holiday weekend. So if you have any questions during the session and the tasting, please put them in the Q&A or the chat in Zoom, and we'll tackle them. And without any further ado, it's my great pleasure today to host the winemaker from Chateau Montelena, Matt Crafton. Welcome, Matt. It's great visiting with you guys today.
Thanks so much for having us, Sam. Happy to be here.
That's it's awesome to be traveling to the Napa Valley, to this gorgeous part of the world. I want to ask you a question. You probably get asked this question all the time. What makes Chateau Montelena so special?
What makes Montolina so special? It's a great question. We do get asked it a lot of time, and we'll try to be brief, that's for sure. So I think kind of there's the textbook answer, but I think the real answer is that we're a little bit of a relic. We are one of the original icons of Napa Valley. Like, as you mentioned, one of the brands that put Napa Valley in the new world of wine growing on the map. And since then, since the 1970s, we're still family owned. We're still here. We're ruthlessly working on improvement. It's what's kept us at the top of the heap, like you said, as a crown jewel, where so many others have fallen off. You look at this family, the Barrett family that owns us, you look at every single person that works here, all the wines we create, and I think we're making the best wines we've ever made right now. Obviously, I'm a little bit biased, but I think it's a really incredible place run by incredible people, and we love bringing happiness to our customers.
I think that's a great distillation of what makes it great. I'll tell you what I think makes it so special. And that is that every time I have opened a bottle of Chateau Montelena wine, it's been a life-changing experience for somebody like me who likes wine.
You're
Recently,
hired, Sam.
I mean, we were at the New York City Winter Wine and Food Festival in 2 or 3 months ago in New York City, and in the VIP suite we had some great food, some filet mignon, some different things, and we had a lobster roll, like a fresh lobster roll that was part of that VIP suite experience, and we were pairing it with a Chardonnay from Chateau Montelena.
Wow.
And it was magical. Like it was incredible. And so when we occasionally there's a couple of bottles left at the end of one of those events, and I made sure to grab that bottle of Chardonnay. It was unopened Chateau Montelena, and I'm still figuring out which thing I'm going to pair it with, but that's going to be another magical moment. So I'm a huge fan.
You'll have to let me know when you do that.
I definitely will. So give us, and by the way, just so everybody knows, today we're going to be tasting Zinfandels from Chateau Montelena. They are no less special than that Chardonnay. They're incredible. Give us a brief overview of Chateau Montelena's Hollywood star turn, its role in the movie Bottle Shock.
Well, we like to say that never let the truth get in the way of a good story. And it was actually the movie was released like a week after I started work here in 2008. And you know, there was so much fanfare, there was excitement. It's we like to joke that it's kind of like the Mighty Ducks go to Napa, but it's a feel-good story. And I'll tell you what, right now, I think that's what everybody needs, is just a really fun story where the good guys win in the end, the hero gets the girl. I mean, all those really great things. Hollywood doesn't seem to make too many movies like that. And so, but what it does is it gives, I think, an overview of the important points of really what was going on at the time. I think Alan Rickman's portrayal of Steven Spurrier, even though Mr. Spurrier may not agree with it, I think it's quite entertaining, to say the least. And I think the most accurate portrayal of anyone in the movie is my boss, our CEO, Bo Barrett, played by no less than Chris Pine, wig and all. And it's a really fun movie. And it's I don't know. I saw it twice in the theaters. It may be the only movie I've ever done that.
Well, you're a winemaker, so I will say I have an embarrassing admission to make, and that is that I think I saw like 10 minutes of it once on a flight, and the flight was landing and they turned the movies off. So I'm actually planning to watch it over the Memorial Day weekend.
That's great.
On the heels of our chat. In fact, speaking of chat, somebody just put in the chat that it is such a great movie. So
yeah,
I would imagine when we're all not on quarantine and you guys are open and the tasting room is open, I would imagine there's a few people who bring it up when they visit.
They do, and I think it's an important part of the historical context. You know, one thing about it is, you know, we want to honor our tradition. We want to honor our history. And I think it's an important footnote. I think it's that foundation that helped build this brand. But we use it in the context of where we are today and where we're going. And in a lot of ways, the Judgment of Paris and Bottle Shock, that kind of dichotomy is really similar to how Montolina is. I mean, given your really generous and certainly, I hope quite fair introduction to who we are, we're held in relatively high stature. And I think people expect us to be, I don't know, pretentious, stuck up, proud. But when you meet us, you find that we're obviously incredibly hardworking when it comes to taking our wines that we create seriously and what we do seriously and how we host our customers seriously. But we don't take ourselves very seriously. I mean, I think we have to understand this is wine. We're not curing cancer. We're not curing COVID. Our job is really simple, to make just a really exquisitely delicious beverage that people can enjoy in great times, that they can lay down, they can enjoy with friends and family, that really highlight what we think wine is supposed to be, coming from this incredibly magical place. I know you have a picture of our state vineyard, but at least a piece of it behind you, but I feel really fortunate to be a part of it.
No, that's awesome. And by the way, the power, I mean, let's not underestimate the power of Hollywood is pretty awesome.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about like a movie like Sideways,
Right.
you know, many people, certainly just regular wine enthusiasts, I know this because I'm in the wine business, but Merlot, just because Paul Giamatti just trash talked it for a whole movie, Merlot prices went down by 20 to 25% for 2 or 3, 4 years there. And you had people saying Merlot's terrible, and it's just because they had watched this Hollywood movie. So the great thing for you guys is that in, you know, Bottle Shock, Chateau Montelena comes out on top, and like you say, the guy gets the girl, the good guys win. So
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, Bottle Shock in a lot of ways was, sorry, Sideways was a very sad movie on a, if you really think about it.
It was.
And I wouldn't say that, you know, Paul Giamatti's character wasn't really necessarily wrong about Merlot. I mean, you look at, my opinion, there was a lot of really bad Merlot being made back then. You look at the time period, late 90s, Merlot was everywhere. It was really trendy, and probably some of that needed to go away. And so what the Merlot that's left is really quite good, the Merlot that survived. The problem is they took all that crappy Merlot, pulled it out, and they planted it, and now they make crappy Pinot Noir. So we're not much better off.
I'm going to tell a funny story about Zinfandel and Pinot Noir in a minute, but we'll keep going. I like to try to answer questions on the fly. We have two questions that came up already.
Great.
On the deal, on George's amazing promo code deal with promo code Zinfandel, get free shipping anywhere in the US on 6 bottles or more. Tracy asks, Zinfandel, ? Will they ship immediately to South Florida? I'm going to answer that question. Tracy, it's actually the code. Don't tell anybody this. It'll work for any of the wines on the website. So it could work for the Chardonnay or the Cabernet. And yes, they will ship immediately to South Florida.
Yeah, the only caveat I'd say is we typically don't ship Fridays because UPS, FedEx doesn't actually work on those days. So we typically, any orders that come in Thursday, Friday, we shoot for the next business day to make sure it's not sitting, you know, baking in a hot warehouse.
Yeah, that's important.
Really the only caveat. We want the wine to get to you in good shape.
Ship it at 56.
That's right.
And Darren asked, do you ship to New Jersey? I believe the answer is yes.
Anywhere it's legal, we ship.
Yep, it's legal to ship from California to Jersey. The next question, Matt, this is a tough crowd today. They're putting on a spot. Why did you stop estate bottling the Zinfandel? I loved the 2009. The newer vintages are good, but those estate bottle ones were amazing.
Well, so we still estate bottle everything, so that hasn't changed. I think what Mr. Al Anonymous is asking is we have a label change. You guys will see a little bit later when we start going through the wines. You know, we grow our Zinfandel here on the estate, and starting back in about 2011, 2012, we started a pretty comprehensive replant. And so part of that meant some of our, you know, old Zinfandel Primitivo had to come out along with some Cabernet. We're still in the middle of the Cabernet portion of that. And so there's a time period, vintages 2013 through 2017, where we actually partnered with some of our neighbors who grow amazing Zinfandel. Some of those Zinfandel vines are from the late 19th century, early 20th century. And we saw it as an opportunity to help give them a little business during some tough times here in the Valley, and kind of augment the little bit that we were producing. So it's all still estate bottled, but legally there has to be you know, a significant portion of the wine to be considered an estate wine. And so during those vintages, we weren't hitting that percentage. So back with 2018 vintage that we actually just bottled in March, all those new Zinfandel Primitivo plantings are back online, and so the wine becomes an estate product again.
So it's been there all along, and it's coming back with a vengeance. So that's awesome. Speaking of Paris, how does Bordeaux and French style winemaking play into the history at Montolina and up to today?
So I think that maybe the good place to start would be kind of where we began. So if you think about in the early 1970s or 1960s in Mondavi and Charles Krug's place, there really wasn't a Napa Valley identity in terms of, well, what are we supposed to be growing? What varieties? What are our wines supposed to taste like? And so many producers, including our first winemaker, Mike Gergich, looked to the old world to, for lack of a better term, prototype the kinds of wines that they thought would do well here. And so I think that was sort of the beginning of, or those were the roots, so to speak, of kind of the classically styled wines that started to become very popular in the 60s and 70s, and I'd say into the 80s. And but people realized that we don't grow grapes in Bordeaux. We don't live in France. Our soil's different. Our climate's different. There are a lot of things that are different about California, those being two of them. And so for some people, they decided to move it into a different direction, and in terms of how they handled their wines and how they crafted them. I'd say what's unique about Montolina is that this property here allows us to use a lot of the very classic, both Bordelais and Burgundian winemaking techniques on our wines. And for those of us who are classically trained, like myself, it's really amazing combining those old world techniques in the cellar and in the vineyard, but then also working on ways to improve them. And so we try to integrate kind of the best of what's going on now. We try to stay in a leadership position when it comes to winemaking, obviously, but we also understand that there are a lot of really great things that did come out of the old world for hundreds of years of winemaking. But the key is you have to have the property that can support that, number one. So you have to have the grapevines that can do it and the fruit that can do it. And then you also have to have that desire to build these ageable wines. I'd say not everybody has that anymore. We really want to create a wine for you that's both delicious and ageable. It's not easy to do, and you can't replicate it everywhere. That's always one of our biggest challenges is when we're crafting these wines, and that includes the Chardonnay, the Zinfandel we're going to taste today, or the Riesling or the Cabernet Sauvignon, is this wine needs to taste delicious when you pull that cork, but it also needs to taste delicious after you've cellared it. And the wine has to taste better even. Yeah. So it's a very integrative approach, if that makes sense, from literally what's going on underground through what's happening above ground in the sky, all the way to the cellar, cave, and the bottling line.
That's so cool. What's changed at Chateau Montelena since 1976 when you hit the world stage and won that big award?
So a lot's changed around us. I think the industry's changed. The American wine consumers changed. I think people's interests have changed in wine. We have a new generation of wine consumers. But I think that Montolina has really stuck to its values. If you look at what made this company great in the first place, you look at this, there's this strong sense of curiosity, looking for new ideas, ways to improve. There's this, we all have this tremendous amount of dedication to what we do. I'm the biggest critic of all of our wines. George Blankensee, our estate director, he's an ex hotel and resort guy and constantly looking for new ways to make the guest experience better. And so I think from a cultural standpoint, it's stayed very similar, and I think that's been a good thing. It's why we've kind of maintained our stature. But on the other hand, we're not backward looking. I think we still have this beautiful property. We're still family owned. The Barretts still own the winery, and they give us a lot of latitude in terms of what we're trying to create. We're not trying to make the same wines we were making in the 1970s. We come up with new ideas. Probably 20% of all my wines are in some sort of like research and development. We're trying to make the wine better every single year. So it's that constant, that kind of like relentless pursuit of improvements, and at the same time trying to do the little things to make to not only make you have a better experience here, but to build that connection with our customers.
Yeah, that's a really important point. And I think that, if you know the brand Chateau Montelena and how iconic and high profile it is, the idea that it's still family owned is a pretty big deal. It's pretty significant. There's some major and wonderful wineries, wonderful wines that are big names that, it's been many years since they were family owned.
Right.
They're owned by big multinational companies. And so I think it's a huge deal, at least to me, as somebody who's a fan of so many of these producers, that you guys with your brand maintain that family owned focus.
And I think it's also that, there's no other money behind this winery. I mean, we don't have any tech money. There's no oil money. The only way that we pay our people, pay our vineyard workers, our cellar workers, me, anyone else working here, is when someone pulls a cork. So there's that incentive, obviously, to make sure that we're, we're at the top of the heap.
Last thing before we start tasting. And by the way, for those of you who just joined us, there is an awesome deal, promo code deal with Chateau Montelena. It's promo code Zinfandel. That's promo code Zinfandel. And you get free shipping on 6 bottles or more. It lasts through the holiday weekend. And again, don't tell anybody, but it actually works on all the wines on the website, not just the ones we're tasting today. Last question.
Real quick, but just to add on to that, I think right now, because 2 of the bottles we're tasting today are literally from the library, I think they don't have both of them up on the website just yet. Those should be up by the end of the day. But if you don't see it when you log in, you can always pick up the phone and call us, or reach out to us via social media or chat or passenger pigeon, whatever your favorite flavor of communication is, and we'll get you taken care of.
Awesome. Yeah, I think I saw 2 of them on the website today.
Mm-hmm.
The 15, I think George is putting up as we speak.
George is literally unpacking the bottles himself right now.
He's in the data center. He's in the server physically.
That's right.
Putting the bottle in there. All right. So last question before we start tasting wine, which is going to be so cool.
Great.
All your wines at Chateau Montelena are great, in my opinion.
Thank you.
What's the most popular Chateau Montelena selection?
So I think most people get introduced to us either through the Chardonnay or through our Napa Valley Cabernet. That compliment you gave that all of our wines are delicious really means a lot, because I will say that we spend just as much time on this, $39 bottle of Zinfandel as I spend on the $175 Estate Cabernet. And it's really important to me that no matter how you interact with us, whether that $39 bottle is a really super special treat for you, I want it to be amazing. And so I'd say that just by volume, it's probably going to be the Chardonnay or our Napa Valley Cabernet, but it's that Estate Cabernet that is the crown jewel, the grand vin of the property. And it's absolutely worth getting your hands on a bottle if you can.
I'm going to repeat something you just said. The $39 bottle of Zinfandel gets every bit of the tender loving care and thoughtfulness as the $175 bottle of the Cabernet Sauvignon. That's another way of saying that for those of us who love to find those diamonds in the rough, there are wines in your portfolio not as well known as the Cabernet Sauvignon or the Chardonnay that are absolutely spectacular. And I'm gonna give my 20-second story about Zinfandel before we start tasting these 3 Zinfandels, and that is, and forgive me if you've watched, I've told this once before on the broadcast. I was at a business dinner. I was nominated, as I sometimes am, to order the wine, and the woman who was sitting next to me, there were 5 of us, said, I said, "What do you like?" She said, I only drink Pinot Noir. And I was like, I found the biggest, baddest California Zin. I mean, it was like a Mack truck, coming through the door. The waiter brought it over. I tasted it. I said, great. We poured it. She tasted it. She said, "Oh my God, this is the best Pinot Noir I've ever had." So for those of you who doubt the Zinfandel, and I had to tell her, I wanted to just never tell her, but for those of you who doubt the Zinfandel, we're in for something special. So we're going to get started with the 2012 Chateau Montelena Zinfandel. Tell us about this wine, Matt.
So I think it's it's worth mentioning first and foremost that, you know, we make Zinfandel because we like to drink it. You know, another perk of being family owned, and we don't make very much of it. It's from the very beginning when Jim Barrett purchased this property in 1971, and when we were replanting it from all of those post-prohibition varieties, we focused first and foremost on putting the right grape in the right place. And I think that's it sounds really simple, but it's something that is overlooked routinely in premium wine growing in the industry. And what it basically means is that if on your property, and this is when you come visit, you'll see this, but there's certain places and certain pieces of ground that are definitely more well suited to varieties other than Cabernet Sauvignon, which seems to be obviously the most popular and widely planted variety here in Napa Valley, and for good reason.
Yeah.
The problem becomes in certain areas where, you know, you can either produce like D plus or C minus Cabernet, or you can produce A plus Zinfandel. You know, you're not going to make nearly as much money on the Zinfandel, I promise. Even D plus Cabernet will make you more money than Zinfandel.
Yeah.
But for us, it's Zinfandel is what we want to do. So I'd say that's, you know, first and foremost worth noting. So this is our 2012, and I think the first piece, if anyone who's tried this before, it's our state Zinfandel. It's not like many of the other California Zinfandels you've tried before, especially if you tend to be a fan of Dry Creek or Lodi, and you think of kind of the Zinfandels you were describing, Sam, that tend to be really massive and really extracted. Our Zinfandel, the estate Zinfandel, is actually 60% Primitivo. Primitivo is an Italian grape variety, and up until basically, I think it was 1999, everyone thought Zinfandel and Primitivo were two different grape varieties. And then Carol Meredith at UC Davis sequenced the DNA on both and found out that they were the same. And so Primitivo is a clone of Zinfandel, or Zinfandel is a clone of Primitivo, depending on where you're from. But Primitivo originated in Puglia in Italy. And they're very complementary when it comes to flavor. Primitivo tends to be much more red fruit driven, ripens a little earlier, maintains its acid a little bit better than Heritage California Zinfandel. But when you put them together, they create something really magical. And so, like I said, in the 2012, what you notice is that it's, you know, this exquisite blend of just both red and dark fruit, that red fruit being pretty rare these days in California Zinfandel, but also it has this, you know, beautiful, lively, fresh, acidic backbone. And it's a great way to stump people who don't really know how Zinfandel can be made, but it's a very difficult way to make Zinfandel too. Mm-hmm. If you've ever visited the valley and you see the Zinfandel vines there, you notice they're really big clusters, and Zinfandel tends to ripen kind of strangely, where unlike Cabernet and Merlot and even Primitivo, you'll see a Zinfandel cluster and half of it's ripe, and then the other half that isn't facing the sun will still be green. And so most producers will wait until that green side catches up. And by the time you have that, you have raisins on the other side. And that's how you end up with a very boozy, rich, high extract Zinfandel. And so we go the other direction. We pick our Primitivo when it's ripe, and then we kind of meticulously farm the heritage Zinfandel we have to make a wine that's about, you know, 14.4, 14.5% alcohol, and tends to be well balanced, and you can actually have food with it, which is great.
Awesome. And so what are the tasting notes on this? This is the 2012 that's to my right here on the screen. What are the tasting notes, and what's an ideal food pairing?
Yeah, so I mean, you can find the tasting notes on our website. I don't think I need to read through them word for word, but I mean, it's, again, you're going to notice just the Primitivo component of this is really going to drive it. So while there's still plenty of nice dark fruit and there's some tobacco elements, you'll see that carry through all of these wines. It's really the red fruit, which comes across as a little bit more candied with some age, and then also that acidity. And then you'll notice that the texture on this wine is it's concentrated, but it's not syrupy, and it's not sweet either. Mm-hmm. It's just, it leaves you wanting to go back and take another sip, which is, you know, the goal. And it's also a really incredibly versatile wine when it comes to food pairings. And I think that'll hold true for the other two wines we taste today. I kind of look at Zinfandel as the Swiss Army knife of red wine. So if you need a really good bottle to bring over to somebody's house, and you don't know what they're serving, or maybe, you know, you don't want to spend a whole lot of money on them, but you want to bring a really nice bottle, Zinfandel is a great wine to choose.
That's a great point. All right, should we along to the 2015?
Sure. So 2015, at this point, this is the third vintage since we began our replant. And so as I mentioned with the 2012, where we were about 60% Primitivo and 40% Zinfandel on the estate, with some of our Primitivo coming out, this had skewed a little bit. So it was more 60%, 65% Zinfandel, and then 35 to 40% Primitivo. And the Zinfandel we have in here, this isn't just like Zinfandel that we just happen to find in Napa Valley. These are some of the top producers of Zinfandel in the Valley. And we wanted to make sure that they were people, and actually a number of them have some sort of weird Montolina connection, ironically, but we wanted to make sure that it was the right fit in our program. And so while the wines are a little bit stylistically different, they were difficult to deal with, but different. You'll still notice the Montolina trademark again, which again is that really well-balanced texture, the acidity in there. There's no residual sugar, but they're just layers and layers of flavor. And 2015 was a very ripe, concentrated, rich vintage. And so the tricky part on the winemaking side was, how do we accomplish that? How do we show the best parts of that vintage, which is what we tried to do all the time, but how do we do it in a way that doesn't completely obliterate the varietal character, which is really easy to do in Zinfandel. Yeah. Yeah. So with some selective picks, some earlier, some rather than later. And what we'll do in the cellar is based on what the vintage is showing, either aromatically or on the palate. We'll change how we make the wine, obviously. So there's no recipe. We'll change how we ferment. We'll change the barrels we use. We'll change all different things based on what we taste. And you can only do that when you're on a relatively small scale like we are. Yeah. And so the 15 is a nice contrast to the 12, where 12 was kind of a middle of the road, not too hot, not too cold vintage. It's a very classic Napa Valley vintage, where 15 was a very ripe vintage. And so it was really kind of rolling with that ripeness, while at the same time not letting it roll us, was kind of the key for the 15.
And I should point out, I was remiss on the 2012. The 2012 is $50 per bottle on the website. This 2015 is $39. Obviously the 12 it's different vintage, also aged in the cellar longer, etc. Give us a
couple comments here. Bottle Shock's a great movie. Drinking the 2003 Montolina Zinfandel. That's awesome. That's from Mark. That's awesome. You still have a bottle of that. I think people forget how well Zinfandels age. We have we get to open some of the Zinfandels from the 70s every now and then. And it's amazing. I could literally pour it for you and you'd think it was old Bordeaux. I mean, done right, Zinfandel can age. Thanks for
Mark, save some for me. I'll be over right after.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, awesome. So we'll move to the 17. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And give us a Matt Crafton, the perfect meal for either one of these first two. And just don't think, just say.
Sorry, you broke up there for a second. So can you say that again?
What's the Matt Crafton perfect meal for either one of the first two? Don't think about it, just react.
Carbonara.
Nice. Love carbonara. All right, I love that.
Mm-hmm. Hard to go wrong.
I always like pizza, but I'm a
pizza works too. Tracy asks, how's the 2020 season looking? Great so far. The Chardonnay just went through bloom. Fruit set is underway. We're a little bit behind. I'd say average, but that's not a bad thing. That's kind of what makes each year special. You can kind of see behind me, I'm sitting outside. Can't quite see the vines behind me, given the way the camera's working, but it's an absolutely beautiful day in Calistoga. You couldn't ask for anything more. And we're really super excited about the 2020 vintage and having everybody come back to visit, hopefully sooner rather than later.
You guys are up there in paradise. We're jealous.
Oh, Michael says I'm a great presenter. Obviously, he's a planter, doesn't know me, but thank you.
Michael is Matt's brother-in-law. Thanks, Michael. Glad you could make it.
Also hired, yeah.
All right, so the 2017.
2017. So this is the last year of the kind of old throwback label. I think I failed to mention that was our post-prohibition label, which is pretty super cool. We dug that out for this little
I love it.
this little departure. So if you like that label, get some now, because we're going back to the estate label starting with the 18. 17 was kind of a contrast in so many different ways. It was at once an incredibly warm and incredibly didactic vintage that was filled with, these hot and cold events, and then, culminated, unfortunately, with those incredibly deadly fires at the end of the season. So it was a bit of a whirlwind. But when we were crafting this wine and tasting through it, the goal was to how do we preserve that little bit of, like, I don't know, Tasmanian devil that was in that vintage. There were weeks where it was incredibly hot, and then it was cold again, and then it was foggy, then it was sunny all the time, then the nights were hot, and then they weren't. And so it was it was a challenge from that standpoint, but it was a really fun one. And so I think what you'll taste in the 17 is, if you go back and you taste the 15, you'll say, okay, I get some of those ripe elements in there too. There's a little bit of that, more that, like, that caramel and that espresso, a little bit of that Coca-Cola in there too that you typically see. But the neat thing about Zinfandel, and I say Cabernet does this too, but Zinfandel does it a little bit more, is that when you start getting into some of these, more extreme heat events, when the temperature gets above, like, let's say 95 degrees Fahrenheit, even for a short period of time, the vines literally just stop respiring. They go into, like, self-protect mode. And it doesn't happen often up here, but it happened quite a few times in 17. And so what that does is, basically the vines just stop ripening. And so it almost means that by the time, if you have enough of those over a period of time, your ripeness scale begins to change, and it's almost like the vines didn't see any heat at all. And so some of the fruit that we tasted had this, like, really beautiful, cool character to it. And so that's some more of that tobacco leaf. It's a little bit more, I'd say that's the one that I get. There's a little bit of mocha in there too. You definitely get some of the, like, the blue fruit is in there, and some of the like the raspberry candy aspects, those start to come through a little bit more. And so it's really this incredibly dynamic wine. And I've got it right here in my glass and been kind of smelling it for the last half hour, and it's amazing just how much it's changed since then. And I think for me, that's the exciting part, right? Like, you pour a glass, you should smell it and enjoy it, and it should be really great the way it is. Then you go back to it 20 minutes later, pour another glass, and it should be a really equally delicious experience, but hopefully a little bit different. That's why I tend to be not a huge fan of decanting in general, is that if you have the right wine from the right producer, hopefully that wine is really gonna just light up the room and continue to. It's like fast forwarding to the end of the movie when you decant. You don't want to do that.
Yeah.
You want to enjoy the whole thing. And the 17 is a great wine to do that with.
So let me ask you on the 17, because there's so much complexity and awesome characteristics to it. Is this a wine that makes you thirsty or hungry?
This was a wine that makes me thirsty. It's that finish where, like, wow. I mean, it sounds really cliched to say it, but after we go through all the geeky stuff, after we spend however many hours and days making the blend, I mean, we blend down to like 0.1%. I mean, just like really insignificant, well, seemingly insignificant quantities, but the details are really important. But at the end, after you taste it, it's like, does that make me want to have another glass? Does that make me want to finish the bottle? And and this wine to me really does. Like, you want to go back to that and, like, man, I want another sip of it. And that's when I know we've done a good job, is when I see people, finishing their glass, then going back for another one, or when people are like, hell, like, I don't even use a Coravin, I just drink the whole bottle. I'm like, way to go. So
that is so awesome. And we can get all of these wines on Montolina.com.
That's right.
Promo code is Zinfandel.
Let's get through the weekend.
Free shipping on 6 bottles or more. Matt, this has been great. It's such a treat to spend time with you and visit I'm going to show everybody before we wrap. I'm going to show everybody just a picture from the chateau there.
Yep, that's the front of the building.
That
We got two questions too, Sam. Can I answer those real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's.
So Tony wants to know, with global warming changing, how winemakers approach wine. How are you changing the farming and vinification of the Riesling? That's a really good question, Tony. So our Riesling comes from Potter Valley, way up in Mendocino County. So the first piece goes back to what I was saying before with, growing the right grape in the right place. Not starting off with a climate or an AVA that was already marginal for what you were trying to do. So that was number one. And then number two, I think the jury's still out in terms of how this is going to affect the coastal regions, especially in California. This is our livelihood. We obviously follow it very, very quickly, but we think there's a lot of stuff we can do on the farming side to help mitigate any potential effects. So like a quick, for instance, and I don't want to take up too much of Sam's time here, but all of our new plantings, we're replanting a big portion of our estate vineyard. All the vines are going in at 25 degrees, oriented 25 degrees east of north. Why is that? Well, you come visit the valley, most of the vines just happen to be perpendicular to the road. Why is that? It's easy to farm, right? Well, 25 degrees east of north allows us to put the exact top of the grape canopy directly beneath solar noon. So at the hottest part of the day, that sun is not shining down on our fruit. It's shining on top of the leaves. And so between that and better rootstock selection, clone selection, farming, all these little things, we're really trying to prepare ourselves for whatever the future holds, whether it's warmer, colder, stays the same, whatever it is. But we have to also maintain that outlook that whatever nature gives us, we're going to make the best wine we can. Those of you who've been fans of Montolina for a long time know that the best part about this job, the best part of being a member at Montolina is getting to try all of these different vintages and all of these different expressions. So that certainly won't change. So I hope that answered your question, Tony. And then the last one looks like is from Darren. Oh, did I delete?
So Darren asked, any Chardonnay today for National Chardonnay Day? It wasn't in the tasting, Darren, but it is on the website, and boy, is it good. So
Yep.
if you like the Chardonnay, take advantage of that.
Yep. And we typically have, we, as a perk for coming and ordering from us, we usually sneak up a library vintage periodically up there too. So you can always get the current release. And I think they're planning on releasing the Chardonnay 11 as well. That's one of my favorite vintages by far, especially for Chardonnay. Bo said that might be the best Chardonnay we've ever made. So I would grab that if you can while it's up there. I promise you won't be disappointed. And it looks like we got a note from George and Olivia saying that all the wines, all the Zinfandels are now live on the website, including the 15. So we're good to go.
George, get out of the data center. It's dangerous in there. You're not meant to be in there for a long time.
Yep.
All right. Matt, thank you so much. This has been a true pleasure. It's an awesome way for me to start or early start on the Memorial Day weekend. Hey, let's do this again and maybe do Chardonnay or even do a separate one for Cabernet. I would love
that.
To come back and visit again.
Absolutely. And thanks to everybody for logging in. Thanks for all the support you've given us during these really difficult times. I can't tell you how much it means to us that you support us. We know you have lots of choices, and thanks to Sam and City for putting this together. It's really our pleasure, and we can't wait to see you guys in Calistoga, hopefully before too long.
I'll be there soon.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you again soon. Thanks, Matt. Take care now.
Bye-bye.
Take care.